And she said, he's just opened up for the first time about the death of his mother. He's been in this school for 2 whole academic years, and it's the first time he's ever spoken about the death of his mother. And I made that happen in 20 minutes through a song exercise.
Welcome to Inspiring Voices, the podcast of the Sing Up Foundation. We believe in harnessing the power of singing to improve mental health and well-being for children and young people. I'm Baz Chapman, and in this first series I'll be speaking with inspirational singers, music leaders, researchers and other specialists to consider the unique role of singing, songwriting, voice exploration and creative music making in transforming young people's mental health and well-being.
Inspiring Voices, a new podcast from the Sing Up Foundation.
I'm really pleased to be speaking with Sophie Garner. Sophie is a singer, described by the Times as one of the most stylish British vocalists, a well-being music specialist, educator, speaker, and author of the Creative Songwriting Journal. Sophie seeks to change lives through singing and songwriting. Welcome, Sophie.
That's so lovely. Do you know the Times quote? I've not heard that in years. You see these things on your own website because they exist, but when you hear somebody say something back to you, kind of makes it real, even though you know it is real. It's bizarre.
Oh, well, I haven't heard you sing actually, Sophie, but you're certainly stylish, so I believe it.
Thank you.
Now, on your website, you have a quote from Jimi Hendrix that says, "Music does not lie. If there is something to be changed in this world, then it can only happen through music." Why is that on your website?
Well, first and foremost, we learn from what we listen to, and our parents are obviously sometimes our greatest advocates for that. And my mum played Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin growing up, and they were the first 2 people I was turned on to musically. And so I became very aware of this great power that Jimi Hendrix had. And I just think he didn't care. He broke the mold. First of all, he was the first black musician to come over and have an all-white British band. And it was that I'm raw, I'm authentic, I'm talking about political things, obviously a very political time. He broke the mold musically. And so it's a mixture of, I absolutely think he's one of the greatest guitarists that's ever written, but a bit like Bob Marley, he's one of those people that when he says something, it's poetry in motion. And musicians and songwriters are poets. It's just they've put a melody to it instead.
So relating that down to the sort of the individual level, how do you think music can bring about change for people?
So one of the things that I ask a lot of people that I work with when they're very nervous about singing, so whether that's in an adult choir or whether that's, for instance, today where I've been at Headway working with brain injury, where they literally aren't capable of speaking because their brain injury has meant that the language area of their brain's been damaged and the music area has to take over. They can be very embarrassed about singing. And so one of the first things that I do when they say, how should I start, is I get them to make a playlist. So I call it my Castaway playlist, which has been heavily influenced by Desert Island Discs. And I make no bones about the fact that I've been influenced by that, and I use a page for it in my book, and I get kids to go, right, what would be your Castaway Island music? You can't listen to anything else for a whole year. What are you going to listen to? So for children, it would be pick 3 songs, and it really zones them in, and they have to almost distill down what their favourite songs are. For adults, it's a list of 10, and this acts as a really great breakthrough in that it gets them to think about what they think they're capable of singing, what they love listening to, and then I get them to put it in an order of what they think that they could sing really well and what would be really, really difficult. And so sometimes when I'm working with somebody that says, you know, I really want a goal, but I don't know what to do, I'll say, right, put those 10 songs in an order that you think would be, that's really easy, number 1 at the top, and that's going to be like, whoa, gosh, you know, Bohemian Rhapsody, that's a year away. kind of thing. And it also acts as an empowerment playlist. So for when I'm working with people that are feeling a bit low or a bit angry or they need cheering up, I get them to put playlists into kind of little blocks. So they've got their, I need to be chilled because I'm really stressed at school or at work, or I need to be uplifted, or I need to let off a bit of steam. So, there'll be some more kind of upbeat stuff on there. So it's sort of a bit of a go-to menu, I suppose, if you like.
So focusing that down even more into where young people seemingly increasingly are grappling with mental health and wellbeing challenges in their lives. We know that music has that kind of ability to connect with people in a unique way, that there is probably a song somewhere out there that reflects your situation. What about the actual act of singing itself and the voice? From your point of view, what do you see as the evidence of the power of getting young people to sing, particularly singing together?
I think in a way, all the bets are off, because all of a sudden, when you've got a group of people where it makes a level playing field, you're all singing the same thing, you're all being required to sing it at the same time, obviously breathe at the same time, and there's no ego. And I really, when I'm working with a group of people where there is no, you're going to take a solo, you're all equals here. There's almost this kind of allowance to breathe of, I don't have to prove anything because they're doing it. So we're all just going to jump in the pool together and just see what happens. And there's a risk taking in doing that, but there's also this cohesion and this group totality, I think, because you're all doing the same thing. There's no one standing out. There's no leader. It's really freeing.
Yeah. And have you seen any sort of particular evidence, or have you got any examples you can think of where that precise process has transformed a young person?
Yeah. So there was a situation. I was working in one of the, how could I put this? One of the worst Ofsteded middle schools, secondary schools in the UK, and it was in inner city Birmingham. And I was employed by an agency to go up there with a number of different people. So there was myself, there was a street poet, there was a beatboxer, all really, really creative people. And it was quite intimidating. And I felt scared and out of my depth because I could feel the energy as I walked into this school. And I often work best when I feel out of my depth, because I have to literally, I'm challenged, I'm in the moment, the adrenal is just, I'm in permanent fight or flight and having to think on my feet, which most people would call winging it, but it's not. It's bringing all those trained skills together and going, what's going to work at the toolbox? Right, oh, they've gone there now. Right, I need to go there as well. And it's brilliant because you're learning within your own expertise, if that makes sense. And it sounds perverse, but I get off on that. I get off on being challenged in the moment because it's how I grow as a specialist, I think, and within the practice. So we had this situation where we're actually writing a song, and I was lucky enough to have a brilliant head of music within the school who had a really good class, and he introduced me and he said, I'll be in the room, but he ended up going out of the room quite a lot actually, because he could see that things were going great and I'm just myself with them, and I meet them at their level, and just, it was really chilled, and we started writing this song together and gathering it together. And then we got to the end of the lesson, and one lad who'd really been, I don't want to be here, this is boring, ended up kicking the door, but came back in. And I just thought, you're my challenge today. And I really worked with him. I pulled him back in. He ended up singing. And at the end, he said, I really enjoyed that, miss. And it was like, what happened? He said, I just don't think I'm very good at anything. And it was just, wow. We turned that around, and I wouldn't let him stay out of the room. I thought, I'm gonna meet you somewhere. I'm gonna find it in you. And I said to him, what interests you? Oh, nothing, miss. I'm just like, the only thing I like is football. So I've gotten in. Right, okay, what do you love about football? Well, I love being with my mates and when they score a goal. So I got him writing lines about the energy and the camaraderie. And he said, is that a line then, miss? I went, yeah. You're going to put that in the song, miss? Yeah. And all of a sudden I've created that line and she's just put that in the song. And then I'm singing the line and all the class are singing the line. There is nothing more. I mean, I'm going funny now because when you watch that happening in action, and I can see it on their eyes and going from what is this we're doing to, and he actually cried at the end, and it was just so emotional. And the teacher looked at me, the TA looked at me and was like, and it was incredible, and I was shattered at the end of the day because I just thought, I'm not giving up. And it's those moments, they're really tiring. And there was another situation that day where a young girl had been very, very quiet, and she actually came out as being gay in the middle of writing a song. And I went up and I was helping everyone and I was going around and I can see when people are struggling. I'm like, how are you getting on? She went, oh, can I show you my lyrics, miss? But I don't want you to read them out. And it was pretty obvious to me because it was, I'm in love with her. And I went, is this about your girlfriend? She went, yes, but please don't say anything. And she said, you can only tell the teacher. And then I went and told the teacher, and the teacher said, we've known something's not right. And she brought it out in that song, because doing so within lyrics is like providing a safe narrative rather than, look, are you going to tell me what's wrong? Are we going to discuss this? What's going on? That's so confrontational. Whereas we're going to write a song, then all these thoughts come up or don't come up. And if they do, they've got this beautiful creative allowance to put down on paper if they want to. And so all these magical things happen. I had a situation in a primary school, and it really touched me, and I now speak about it whenever I can to show the power to teachers of what they can achieve in 20 minutes. And I don't mind sharing this with you because it's so powerful. I went in and I only had 25 minutes with each class, Baz. So I was brought in. It was a year's project with a primary school. And it was 3 one-day workshops spaced out, and the end result would be a whole school song, all based around the themes of the school and what they stand for. And we wrote a song called Glass Overflowing, which is based on one of the things one of the metaphors that I have in one of my books, which is, I'm not glass empty, glass half full, I'm glass overflowing, and always having a positive mindset and trying to see the good in things. And I went to, I think it was year 5, and this little lad was sat there and he was writing away, and all of a sudden the TA started crying. I thought, what on earth is going wrong? And all of a sudden I was really worried. I thought, oh God, is everything all right? And she said, can you come outside? And she said, he's just opened up for the first time about the death of his mother. He's been in this school for 2 whole academic years, and it's the first time he's ever spoken about the death of his mother. And I made that happen in 20 minutes through a song exercise, which on the surface, and I make it look as though I'm sort of not sure and I'm getting a bit confused, but it's all part of the journey. And then the children start thinking, and he started writing about his mother, and it opened up the narrative and the dialogue for them to be able to connect with him. So it was incredibly powerful. That was just 20 minutes in to a half-hour, class session.
Wow, there's some amazing examples, and so in so many cases, in fact, every one of those examples, I think you probably couldn't come up with any other single activity that would have achieved that outcome. Which is just extraordinary. So, I mean, I know we'll come on to talk about your research, but what does the researcher in you sort of think about when you think about that young person and what's going on in their mind and in their body? where that process has somehow unlocked it. What is it that's going on that's allowed that to happen, do you think?
I think it's that I have created the opening, and then it's allowing their creative mind to go off, so they're not being preached at, because I think often, I hate to say it, we teach at children, not to or with them. And the process that I use is a journey with them. So there's a lot of feedback with the children. And so what do you think? So if I tell you the process that I did, so you've got some sort of context to this, I used for this particular exercise the song Let It Be by the Beatles. Now, what I do is I start by playing the song, and then I say to them, what do you think it's about? You know, and it obviously starts, when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And I stop it and I go, who's Mother Mary? And is it Jesus and Mary? And then there's always some smart cookie, normally, that will go, is it his mum? And it is his mum. And I'll go, what's it about? And at the same time, I'm also starting to explore the ease with which you can write a song. So I go, how easy is this chorus? Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be. And I go, oh my goodness, kids, 4 let it be's, and there will be an answer and a let it be. And that is one of the biggest selling songs by the biggest selling bands of all time. And I'm like, can you write a song? And they're like, yeah, of course we can. And so suddenly the alchemy and the black art of songwriting has been dispelled. And then I'll do something like Stand By Me, which again, you know, darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by. And I'm like, how big do you think that one is? How many royalties has that raised? They're like, miss, you know, can we write a best-selling song? So all of a sudden they've gone totally the opposite to, we can write a brilliant song, and their egos just kind of flipped. So then what I do is I'm doing 2 things. I'm going, you can write a song. I'm planting the seeds. I'm letting you realise just how brilliant this is going to be, because I'm playing you a song by one of the famous bands. So they're going, oh gosh, this is really easy, this songwriting. But equally, I'm also starting to get them thinking about the content of the lyrics. So what happened with this little boy is I then said, right, Mary was actually Paul McCartney's mum. And I said, what do you think this song's about? And then some of them are really clever, and they're like, it's about hope. It's about someone missing somebody. And normally in years 5, 6 and up, this is when they start to get it, but it's rare. And then somebody may get it and says, has something happened to his mum, but not often. And so it's a real bombshell when I then go, he lost his mum at the age of 14 when he was at school, and she died, and he was obviously upset, and he had a dream about her. And he said that in the dream, she was like in his room. She is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom. And he said in the dream, she went, look, Paul, don't sweat it, okay? Just chill out, let it go, let it be. And so the kids are all going, and you can see the wheels starting to go round. And then this little boy that's at this point where he was frantically, then it connected with him. And he obviously saw the comparison and then started writing about his mum. So at that moment, and he was just furiously writing, and it was like, well, you've opened up the narrative. He found that comparison, and he didn't need, no teacher had to go, right, do you want to talk about the death of your mum? It's like, well, hang on, this has happened to me. I'm going to write about this. It was just so magical.
And extraordinary for you. I'm sure that you probably flip between, I suppose, being intimidated by, or as you'd said, being a bit scared going into a setting, but then having that amazing reward of some of the outcomes of it. And
yeah,
I'm not surprised you exhausted.
I cried.
Yeah. Right. So let's change tack slightly. I'd like to find out a bit more about the research work that you've done. Can you tell me how
Mm.
you sort of started to get interested in doing that?
So at the time, I'd just begun my MA. So the first part of my research I undertook within a primary school that I was working, and I was in a really unique position because I was given a title that effectively is only for a secondary school, which was artist in residence, which is really unheard of in a primary school. But I had a very amazing head that created that title for me, and I was in the beautiful position of being able to teach every single child in that school from nursery and reception right up to year 6. So I was able to run songwriting groups. I had an after school choir, a drama club. I taught whatever I wanted. It was amazing. I literally could create all of my own work. And I thought this is just an incredible opportunity to get some really, really good qualitative and quantitative data to actually research my first project for my MA. And so I devised what, unbeknownst to me at the time, would then become the book. The book became the workshop. So you've got this kind of dovetail of the two. So I underpinned and looked at everything sort of backwards. I looked at why these things were going so well in my teaching, and then went, so what's happening? Why is that working? And then I went and looked at all the kind of social constructs of singing in groups. I looked at how important play is to early development, and the fact that play between the ages of 1 and 4 is absolutely critical for our growth as humans and for neural pathways. And then, of course, we suddenly find ourselves in academia, and all of a sudden we're having to sit still in the chair for a very long period, and then told we could go and play for 15 minutes and come back. And it's impossible to do. And so I really realised that learning through play is a really, really powerful tool, because you teach, but it feels like play. And so one of the things that I still do, and I do it with adults as well, is I don't call it homework, I call it home play. So just by changing that mindset, I've got parents going, why didn't I think of that? And I'm like, why aren't teachers thinking of that? Because it's that word work. Right, kids, you're going to get some home play. This has given us home play, and they're excited about it. It's not homework.
So what was the research telling you? And were there any surprises in it?
It really taught me how important the group singing is within children together, and how much peer support is important. The other thing that was very relevant was how involved the voice growing up is with our identity, and how we speak to children about their singing voices, how damaging that can be. And I see that with adults that have been told at school that they can't sing, and it's still impacting them now. And so regardless of the ability of the children, they would be in the group. And I'd have to work harder, obviously, with some of those children. But the ones that weren't as great at keeping in tune were pulled along by the ones that were, and they grew their confidence almost by coming in through the wings, if that makes sense. And they wouldn't have been able to do that had they been on their own. So it was power in numbers. So the group dynamic is really important for singing with children. I really, really feel that quite strongly. Unless you know you can sing and are, oh, I've had an audition, but the children that are really uncertain and fearful, being within the crowd and slowly putting one's head above the parapet is a brilliant way of building confidence.
So if let's say you've got a head teacher who says, well, yeah, the thing is, we're under pressure, we've got to get the basics right. Singing is a nice to have, but it's not going to be a priority at this time. How do you persuade them otherwise?
Oh my goodness. Well, I first of all would obviously talk about the many benefits, the rewiring, creating new synapses, Nucinate connections, the lowering of blood pressure, the improved memory, the cognitive learning, the increased lung capacity, the fact that they can use singing in other subjects to learn, obviously by singing mathematically. I mean, goodness grief, when I grew up, that's how we learnt our times tables. We sang. So I would take that in with them about how they can use singing to make learning easier for them in a school. One of the things that I've said to a lot of teachers is, why don't you start your day with a class playlist to really get everybody settled at the beginning of the day, after lunch, and then at the end of the day. So I said this to one teacher, and I actually need to follow up with her to find out how it's gone. I said, get a playlist together of a song from every single child. So that's obviously going to be pretty much a month's worth of playlist if you're doing one a day. And I said, don't announce when you're going to do it, but decide, when you're going to play that person's playlist and make a point of saying you're going to do it. So it's a bit like show and tell, but it's so more validating because it's, oh my goodness, this is my favourite song. This is playing it. And then around that, you would do an activity, whether that's get up, move around the room, saying a times table or something they're learning, or you might do a breathing exercise or a stretching exercise that goes with the rhythm, or you might do some body or table or chair percussion, and it just gets the energy moving. Or the reverse, you pick something really, really that's settled, and you might do a visualization or a meditation kind of exercise where you're breathing in, and you maybe do a balloon breath, where you visualize a color and then you get the children breathing in and out, and they might do a chant with it or something. So it can be used for energetic purposes and for calming down a room.
But it's also really useful for a teacher who thinks, I'm not very comfortable using my singing voice.
Absolutely.
I can't possibly do anything around this.
Yeah, because then you're letting the artist do singing for you. But it's great because it really focuses people's energy, and kids love music. So they're all, it's infectious. So they're all, if one person starts singing, it's going to be infectious, and they're all going to do it. And everyone loves to see a teacher joining in singing as well.
I know lots of people out there, particularly those working in schools, who might think, wow, wouldn't it be amazing to have Sophie? We could achieve such extraordinary things. And of course, that is true. They could. But if they can't, for whatever reason, access a professional, do you still think that there's things that can happen that can still be transformational, even if people are low on confidence?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So part of when I created my book, I realised that there are so many schools for which music provisions are just they're becoming less and less. And I'm speaking to teachers all the time that are saying, we don't have any PPA cover, we haven't got anyone coming in to teach music, and it's heartbreaking. And so I thought, well, I really need to kind of try and devise something to help the teacher that doesn't have a musical background. And so I've almost finished it. I've completed a workshop training day for teachers so they can implement a lot of what I do and structure it and interweave it into the day without actually having to do any singing on their own. It can be an all-encompassing, all-class experience, but it's something that could be taught to every teacher in the school so that everybody's class gets something musical at least once a week.
Fantastic. Now, here we have your two books, The Creative Songwriting Journal and If You Can't Say It, Sing It. Tell me how they came about, because it's a big thing writing a book and publishing a book, isn't it? Did you always think that that was going to be your thing, or did it come to you?
I have to be really, really honest here. So writing the first book, this one, pretty much saved my life in lockdown, because I was in a pretty dark place. I'd lost all my work. Within 2 days, like most musicians did, I was feeling pretty low. I was really struggling with my mental health. And I thought, I've got to do something. And so I gathered all my research and all the things that I'd been writing down over a period of 5 to 10 years, which was just, streams and streams of different journals. And I gathered it all together. And by December 2020 of lockdown, I published it. And I felt confident because learning how to research and learning how to write academically gave me the confidence to do it. And then I got it peer reviewed by people that I really respect within the industry, within the teaching industry, and they all okayed it. And then I thought, right, I'm ready to go with this. And then I got other teachers using it, and it's just grown. And now it's in schools here in Canada. It's even in with one musician in Australia, I believe, as well. And so schools have bought like 60 copies at a time. I then went on to produce that second book, and this title is kind of, this really is my statement. This is my go-to, which really comes back to what the little boy said, because he couldn't say what he wanted to about his mum, but he could, and so could the girl that came out, as being gay. She could say it through the song. So if you can't say it, sing it is such a powerful explanation of what I've seen happen in songwriting. But everything was underpinned by my research, and I really needed it to have it validated so that people wouldn't just go, oh, that's a nice song, that's a nice book, with a bit of singing, jazz hands. I needed for people to go, well, hang on, no, this person's really actually given this is how, why, and when it works. And I've taught with in excess of about 4,000 children in the last 17 years. And so my process in songwriting has been well and truly squeezed within many schools, and some of them, in the worst possible areas where children's vulnerability and their self-worth is just on the floor, right through to private schools. So I know it works. The approach obviously slightly changes, but the methodology is the same.
So who is this book for?
That's another interesting question, because it's for, I designed it for 7 to 12-year-olds, and it needed, because anything obviously that you release has got to be for somebody, otherwise the branding message is unclear. However, the process I've used with adults, with teenagers that have self-harmed, I mean, the groundwork for the first book really started with a teenager who I actually thank in the book by her first name. We're still in touch, Hannah, and she was having lessons with me privately, and she'd been coming to see me for about 3 months. So I knew her, not really well, but I knew her well enough to know what kind of mood she was in on arrival, as we do. I think when we're really astute and we're good at reading people and picking up on emotions, which I think most creatives are, when something's amiss. And she arrived and I just went, Hannah, what's up? It wasn't like, are you okay? I just went, Hannah, what's up? And she just burst into tears and she went, I've tried to take my own life and I'm not telling anyone but you. And I just thought, where do I go with this? And, underneath my swan feet were doing this. And on the surface, I'm going, please, can you speak to someone at school? Can you tell your mum? I'm not telling anyone but you. And this was at the time, we were going back like 10 years. And so she left my house and I phoned this suicide helpline and I said, I don't know what to do. She's a private student at my home. And they said, well, if she's refusing to tell the school and the parents, you can't break that trust. And I went, what do I do? Because I'm really, really concerned about her welfare. And they said, well, what does she do with you? And I went, I'm a private singing teacher. And they said, oh, she obviously trusts you. And so I basically, she still refused to tell anybody. She said, I really enjoy my singing, and my mum sees that I'm down and I really want to have these lessons with you. And I got her songwriting, and unbeknownst to me, I was writing part of the passage of how to get from A to B. I was writing my book without realising it. And we went on this journey together, and she built up this huge file of lyrics. She got through it. She came out the other side. She's now a thriving professional. And we're still in touch, and it's amazing. But, you know, a frightening experience, a very frightening experience.
Yeah. So just to close off the circle of the kind of people that this is for and what they might get from using your book.
So the great thing about the book is I've written it so that it can be used as a standalone book, just a child and the book. It could be used with a parent and a child going through it together. So particularly if a child is struggling with learning difficulties, or if they're slightly younger. So I have had 5 and 6 year olds with parents. Parents have bought it, and I've said it is a bit young for them, but if you're doing it with them and guide them, and they've had great success, then that works really well. Children, particularly with autism, have found real success with it. So it can also be used then as a whole class project with a teacher guiding them and using the book. So I've had some schools where teachers have bought one per class, and then they take the children through the different exercises together. So it's got lots of different outlets, and it's because it's a guide step by step as opposed to flick here and there. You literally go page to page.
And you say you're developing some training and professional development to go alongside it.
Yeah, so I'm just finishing off my training workshop for teachers, and I've also created these they're called Poem for Me, and it's a really positive poem that when I go to schools, I gift the schools these gorgeous poems, and it's like an empowerment poem. Some teachers put it on the wall, some of them have put them in particular students' drawers that need to read this as a positive affirmation. And I've also created something called positive postcards. So I created these 6 postcards that all have a singing activity and or a breathing activity, which is positive and has some sort of focus or well-being. So some children have carried them in their lunch boxes, or they've got them in their bag or in their pocket, and they get them out and read them when they're feeling a little bit anxious, and they've got the birds on the front that match with the branding of the books, and I've got little badges as well that go with it. But I'm now writing my 3rd book, so I've got a working title, but I'm not going to say what it is yet because I literally have only just started in the last week. I'm writing my first adult book, so I'm taking everything that I've done and writing an adult version, which pretty much is just really remixing and adapting just for an adult audience.
And you work with adults in singing as well, don't you?
Yeah, so it's quite exciting. I'm really excited to be writing an adult book.
Fantastic. And you are a choir conductor, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, I've got three choirs. My one tonight is in Buckingham. I've got one in Earthling Borough and one in Olney, as well as a couple of brain injury choirs as well. But the 3 ones that I run are community choirs with performances at the end, you know, of different seasons. And a lot of these people, most of them, the first thing they say on arrival, Baz, is I say, hi, nice to meet you, without any kind of nice to meet you. It's, oh, I'm really looking forward to this, but I can't sing. It's like the go-to sentence, and it's so damaging because as I'm sure you know, only 4%, I think it is, of the world population is actually physically tone deaf. I think I've only had one person that I have really struggled to teach to sing in tune in 30 years of being a professional singer.
Yes, indeed. I'm about to be involved in a new choir up in the Highlands, and I've already heard, you know, round in the village, some people saying, oh yeah, I'm not going to come along to that. I can't sing. Let us persuade you otherwise. Absolutely.
What isn't it interesting though? Because I always try and explain it to potential client students when they're in that state of fear. I said, all you're doing is just speaking with a melody. All you're doing is just speaking with a melody. But it's like, oh my gosh, that's so different though.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get them doing that. I'll get them having a silly conversation with me where we just talk. And even if it's just, let's just talk then, how are you today? You know, and not really properly singing, but making a sound to get over that first hurdle of talking. And then that feels slightly uncomfortable, but it's still not singing. And then I get them maybe, how are you today? And just lengthening the passages and phrases a bit more, which of course feels vulnerable, but it's a really nice step way of getting them to the singing point from the speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talky singers, I call it.
For a lot of people, research feels like something universities do it. And I'm really interested in someone who's obviously a very active musician, be interested in engaging in research in the first place. So how did it come about and why did you do it?
What was really interesting when I took up my master's degree.
Who was that with, by the way?
So that was with Debbie Winter. At the time, it was Voice Workshop. And so I was part of the very first cohort, which was amazing. So it hadn't even started properly as an MA at this point. Ginevra Williams was my professor and it was incredible. And I was actually the only person on the cohort with no degree. I left school with absolutely no qualifications, Baz. In fact, I think it was 73, 83, 84, 85. In 1987, when I was 14, I had the school record for the worst attendance for the entire year. I missed 77 days. And I was an absolute nightmare. I mean, I was a punk. I was missing school. The only thing I loved and was good at was singing. I didn't care for anything else. Drama and singing was it. So here we are, coming into education as a mature student, but really, really wanting it. And I was really scared. And Debbie and Ginevra really had my back. I said, I don't know how to write academically. Et al, what's that? Referencing? Who? What? How do I, and I remember writing my first 1,500 page project, which was just to introduce yourself with a couple of references. And it was like, and I remember my partner, Paul, just overseeing it and correcting it. To then go on 4 years later to write a 17,000 word research project with a distinction that was carried out in a brain injury unit, with ethics that had to be signed off, was just incredible. And I have an absolute love for academia, for research, for reading. It's brought me confidence. It's changed the way that I approach things, the way that I assess and analyse, the proof that I want to see in things, even, down to what I read on the news. It's like, no, there has to be more. And it's a dangerous thing, research, because you go down the rabbit hole and then there's another turning and before you know it, but I'm passionate for it and I've become a bit of a geek and it was one of the best things I've done. It was tough. It's one of the toughest things I've ever done. But what drove me is my love and passion for teaching combined with being a musician. If I'd just been a musician that wasn't teaching and working with people with wellbeing, I don't know if it'd have been enough because I wouldn't have had a really big goal, if that makes sense. And I started working with brain injury and I was already working in schools and with children. That was a big part of my life. That had to be the drive to find out what is needed going forward in education and what I can do and the why and how it works. So that was the drive. And yeah, best thing, I'm really proud of myself as I know Debbie and Ginevra were, because I didn't have a degree. I left school with just like GCSE in drama and English, and that was it. I didn't care for anything else.
Well, you and I both connected with the Singing for Health network, and if people are interested in finding out about the connection between singing and so many aspects of our lives and our health, it's well worth having a look, because there is
Absolutely.
research into so much stuff, isn't there? There's things
Yeah.
around breathing, certainly the link with Parkinson's and dementia, mental health and well-being. And it just starts to give this insight as to why singing is this thing that's so deep within us, because it's an essential part of the way that we live. And you're working, connecting people back into that thing inside of them that is so good for them. That I guess that's why you're having so many transformational experiences with people who perhaps haven't had that opportunity. So that's amazing. So let's finish by asking you a particularly inspiring vocal moment from any time in your life.
Oh, it's actually bizarrely not. It's not gonna. The one that I'm going to tell you is not a performance one. It's a teaching one, and the reason I'm sharing it is because it was a challenge and I was scared, and I'm sort of almost tasting my own medicine here, because of course I'm working with people that are scared all the time, and I'm coaching them to not be scared and to sing. And so what better way to end than telling you something where I've been scared, because that's how we grow, right? We all want certainty as humans. That's how we stay safe. We don't step out of our comfort zone. And the minute we're challenged, it's frightening and we don't know what's happening next. And, you know, the reptilian brain goes, oh gosh, fight or flight. And so I had a situation where, and it's, I'm proud to say it's a video on my website, and every time I watch it, I get a lump in my throat because I'm back there. I started my career in the National Youth Theatre. So when I began my career, I was working with Matt Lucas, who of course has gone on to do British Bake Off, Les Mis, you know, so many different things. And we started out together, and I went back as a teacher. So I came full circle, and Paul Rosebery, the now CEO of the National Youth Theatre, great British company, brought me back in as a teacher, teaching the people that I would have been their age. And I had to put together a choir of 300 people in just 3 days, of groups of 30. So each group of 30 had just 2.5 hours with me, split into soprano, tenor, alto, soprano, tenor, alto. Then they all congregated together, and obviously all those 30s then went to their big 3 sections, but there was no rehearsal because they were running late. And I just remember I was shaking. I was absolutely shaking, and I nearly didn't take the project. I had a meeting with Paul Rosebery at BBC Studios in London, and he went, "This is what I'd like you to do. Do you think you could do it?" And I was thinking, just say yes, worry about it afterwards. I went, yep. Got home, and I went, Paul, what have I done? I can't do this. I'm out of my depth. He went, don't be so stupid. Just think of it as a choir of 40 times. I went, no, I can't. I'm going to have to pull out. And I didn't. I stuck with it, and it was incredible. We did 3-part singing of Human by Rag and Bone Man and Lean on Me, and it just, you just see me and I'm just like this untamed lion, having to go from one end to the other, because the 300 people are so long that the sopranos are so far away from the tenors that I have to keep going back and forth to keep timing, because they can't hear what's happening down there. And this is all on video. And the best thing I did was I just handed my phone to this woman. I went, please, can you film this? It's got me so much work, because it shows my energy and my love for what I do. And I just cried at the end, and I just went, because it challenged me. I was so scared, and the moment came, and it was an absolute success. And it was that lack of belief. And after that, I thought, I can do anything. I'm never going to say no to anything after this. It was so enriching. It really was. It took me right out of my comfort zone and my self-belief.
Wow, what an extraordinary story. God, thank you. Yes, I can certainly imagine that. Am I really going to do this? But yeah, so often it's those kinds of challenges which are the life-defining ones, aren't they? So,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to draw it to a close. Sophie, it's always such a pleasure
Oh, thank
chatting
you,
to you.
Baz. You too.
The experiences that you've had and the lives that you've transformed are really humbling to hear. But I think, yes, a perfect way to finish to hear about the energy and the love for what you do. And that's the wonderful thing about singing, is that can really come across, can't it?
And it's a personal thing. I think that's what's so amazing, is that all of our individual voices, they're, our voice is our conduit. It's our expression of identity. And so to stifle that, why would we do that? Why would we not allow somebody to shine and sing their message, their story, their narrative, either in their own words or, as you said, through the words of a song that connects? Is so important. And we allow ourselves then to connect with emotions that are regarded as negative, and there shouldn't be any negative emotions. Emotions are emotions, but you can connect with some of those emotions that you may be trying to push down by choosing, an upbeat song that you can just get it out through a song, as opposed to going and hitting a wall or getting angry with another child or a parent. It's such a healthy way to do it, but still in a very dramatic way.
Sophie Garner, thank you so much for joining me. This is Inspiring Voices, the podcast of the Sing Up Foundation. Join us for the rest of the series on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and other major platforms. You can also watch the video of each episode on the Sing Up Foundation YouTube channel.
Inspiring Voices, a new podcast from the Sing Up Foundation.